Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 231. Silver Blizzard City's History. The explanation to that has a lot to do with the Silver Blizzard City's history. It is said that over 300 years ago, there used to be a large alliance between gangs, known as the Supreme Alliance, which controlled more than half of this world's underworld factions. Their fame, might and strength were unmatched, and it is said that even spirit Xian experts would detour from their paths upon seeing the Supreme Alliance's emblem obstructing their way, afraid of the troubles they would provoke otherwise. The solitary falcon continued narrating. Slowly, as fate had it, one day, the Supreme Alliance's young master, Yu Ling Feng, happened to meet a woman whose eyes were so beautiful, and style so magnificent that people used to call her the Jade Phoenix of the Nine Firmaments. Her name was Kong Yen Luo, and she was regarded as the world's most beautiful woman. Yu Lin Feng was quite excited by the prospect of wooing her, and hence, he tried any and all means to win her heart over, same as countless other experts, but none of it bore any fruit. Seeing that Kong Yen Luo had repeatedly rejected his feeling, Yu Lin Feng was so pained that he ordered the extermination of the entire Luo family, along with Kong Yen Luo, of course. However, just when Kong Yen Luo's fragrance was about to perish, 3 men suddenly showed up, rescued her, and then fled with her. She fell in love with the eldest of her 3 saviors, and they tied their fates in a bond of marriage soon after. It didn't take long for this news to reach Yu Lin Feng's ears. One day, he encircled the 3 men with the intention of killing them in order to extract his revenge, but was killed by those 3 men in the fight that ensued. Jun Moxie couldn't help himself. Doesn't Solitary Falcon's tale sound very similar to the situation between Guanqing Han and the Shui Han Manor? The eldest of the 3 men was named Han Xiao Yao, the second brother was called Xiao Xing Chen, and the third one was named Shu Duan Xiang. These 3 men were amongst the best warriors of that era's younger generation, and naturally, very talented as martial artists. After killing Yu Lin Feng, the 3 brothers obviously made an enemy out of the Supreme Alliance's master, Yu Zhanyun, who ordered everyone under his command, spare no effort in tracking and killing those 4. The 3 men were well aware of their respective strengths, and knew they would be of no match to the Supreme Alliance in battle. The 4 of them decided to leave, and disappeared without leaving any tracks behind. However, no one knew that these 4 had found refuge in a faraway snow-cladded land. Moreover, the 4 of them had secretly started creating their own forces atop those snow-capped mountains. These 3 men went on to become the 3 founding ancestors of the Silver Blizzard City, establishing its 3 founding families: the Han family, the Xiao family, and the Chu family. A decade later, the 4 of them left the mountains once again after having accumulated a reasonable amount of force since they had decided to stir trouble for the Supreme Alliance. However, the Supreme Alliance was already in a lot of trouble at this time since the public was infuriated by their conduct. Thus, when the 3 of them launched their assault on the Supreme Alliance, they received a large and unexpected response from the rest of the world, with several of the world's finest experts joining hands with them. In less than 3 years, the world's most powerful alliance was not only brought down, but completely removed from the setting. However, Yu Zhanyun and Han Xiao Yao came face to face at a critical juncture during the final battle. Once the 2 men were worn out, Yu Zhanyun issued one last desperate attack Han Xiao Yao simply wouldn't be able to withstand. Seeing this happen, Xiao Xingchen blocked off Yu Zhanyun's killer strike from reaching Han Xiao Yao, using his own body as a shield, but took Yu Zhanyun with him as he parted from this world. At that time, Xiao Xingchen's cultivation had already surpassed Han Xiaoyao's, and was progressing further by leaps and bounds since he aspired to become the strongest in the world. He had a beautiful wife and son waiting for him at his house, and one could truly say that he was living the best years of his life, but had still chosen to die for the sake of protecting his sworn brother. They say his face reveled in a spirit of brotherhood and heroism at the time of his death. Han Xiaoyao was so aggrieved by the death of his younger brother that he publicly took out his sword and cut his own 2 fingers, causing his blood to drip to the ground. His thunderous voice shook the entire world as he swore a blood oath: as long as the Silver Blizzard City remains, the Xiao family's descendants will never perish. And his descendants still uphold his vow to this day. The solitary falcon seemed a bit moved when he was narrating that incident of sacrifice and brotherhood, which was evident from the passionate note his voice had taken. Jun Moxie heaved a long sigh. He had finally understood the meaning behind the solitary falcon's words. The Jun family is very lucky to have survived for this long, very, very lucky. Even though the Xiao family isn't in control of the Silver Blizzard City, but their opinion is very critical when it comes to making the important decisions in the Silver Blizzard City. And no one can do anything about this. Moreover, the city's masters have been holding the Xiao family's descendant very dear ever since, which has spoilt their attitude for the worse. Do you understand it now? If your Jun family is up against the Xiao family, then it also faces the Silver Blizzard City. In fact, it's one and the same thing. After spitting out the entire story in one go, the solitary falcon opened his mouth big, and drank a few mouthfuls of wine before he sighed, and said, "One really can't blame Han Xiaoyao. I too would do anything in order to ensure a life of comforts for such a brother. For such a brother's love, I, solitary falcon, would pay no mind to life and death. But because of this, it would become very difficult to protect your family from the Xiaos. Even I stand helpless in this regard. I have no idea how your uncle's woman has been managing it for so long." The solitary falcon heaved a long sigh, before continuing with a sense of desolation in his tone, "But I'm certain that no matter how she did it, the steps would have been extremely difficult. That girl's life must have become very, very bitter." The solitary falcon leaned to his side after finishing his tale, and started gazing at the dark of the night sky. His eyes were reflecting a strange, unknown, and complex emotion as they stared at the sky above, seemingly concealing the pains of a very distant memory. "So that's what's going on," the young Master Jun sighed. In both his incarnations, this was the first time the hitman's mind actually felt overburdened, since this was first time he was up against a problem he couldn't find a solution to. The Jun family's previous situation had completely changed since several of its cornerstones had been destroyed, bringing the family to a point of decline. The only survivor, Jun Xie, had lost both his legs to disability, aware that there would never be any hope of recovery. Although Grandpa Jun's heart was filled with anger over the loss of his sons, but he was still helpless. After all, one can't twist a thigh with a mere arm, and hence, he was forced to silence his anger as well. However, even though the Xiao family held a very powerful position within the Silver Blizzard City structure, they had still stopped midway in their goal of destroying the Jun family. But why wouldn't they have cut the weed at its roots? There could only have been one reason behind the Xiao family's decision to abandon their task halfway. And this reason was most certainly a woman one could only take pity on. Han Yenyao. God knows what kind of a price she would have paid to keep the Jun family from its doom. And how much effort it must have taken. Only God knows what kind of a life that poor woman must be leading atop those snowy mountains. What kind of a miserable existence has she been enduring? The Jun family's life has surely been very uncomfortable and miserable. But would it even remotely compare to that woman's? although the Jun and the Xiao family's mutual animosity won't allow them to coexist. But poor Han Yanyao's credit cannot never be discredited since she's fighting against her own family for the sake of the Jun family, whilst still maintaining her family's grace. I need to ensure that third uncle and Han Yanyao are reunited as soon as possible so that these lovers can finally get married. The hitman Jun had suddenly started feeling anxious. He had finally understood the plight Jun Wuyi had been suffering this past decade, the pain and helplessness his calm face had been concealing. However, the hitman Jun could barely bear to imagine Han Yanyao's plight. So how could Jun Wuyi endure watching something like this happening to the love of his life? This would have obviously thrown his conscience deeper into the abyss of depression. If it hadn't been for the burden of this entire family's future, if it hadn't been for the cause of his two brothers, if it hadn't been for an aged father, then uncle would have already slit his throat with his own sword. In such circumstances, even a bare existence must have been at least 1,000,000 times more difficult than death. And also 1,000,000 times more painful. Moreover, the only confidant of his sacrifice still sits in wait far away, suffering in silence for just one ray of hope. How could someone endure this? The hitman couldn't even imagine the pain Jun Wuyi had been shouldering this past decade, dragging a disabled body through the routines of life under such miserable circumstances, just for the sake of a father and the future generations, to live just for others. He is a hero. In fact, death would have been very easy, even a knife would have sufficed, but to live like this would be similar to enduring 1,000 cuts to one's soul, every day. And every night. Falcon, you just told me that you're presently at the 5th level of Spirit Xian, and breaking into the 6th level wouldn't as difficult as the breakthrough from the 4th to 5th, but even though you wish to make that breakthrough, you can't because it's been very difficult for you to enhance your cultivation, and you haven't been able to overcome these difficulties as of yet, right? Jun Moxie bit his teeth, while his firm eyes clearly demonstrated his heart's resolve. In fact, the solitary falcon had never heard him talk in such a solemn and slow tone before. The solitary falcon could instinctively feel the power and unwavering determination of Jun Moxie's words, and couldn't prevent himself from being startled as he looked up at Jun Moxie, while his eyes suddenly started exuding a sharp and fierce aura. Why are you saying this, you? What does this mean? Boy, what are you trying to say? Previously this would have been treated as mockery between these two men. However, at this time, the two of them were quite serious since they had clearly understood each other's intentions. In fact, the entirety of their surrounding had also suddenly tensed up in accordance with this impeding and unusually serious discussion. It was almost as if someone had uncovered a bow in the dark of night, with the arrow already touching the cord. My master was always obsessed with refining dawn, and as chance has it, a few years ago, he managed to develop a method to refine a very special dan. Jun Moxie's focused gaze met with the solitary falcon's eyes, and didn't leave them. This dan requires various precious and rare herbs, jewels, and other items as raw material. Moreover, this dan's refining process is even more difficult. However, once it's ready, it will possess the ability to enhance a person's level, regardless of their strength, and without any side effects. Do you understand what that means? The solitary falcon's hawk-like eyes motionlessly stared at him for a long time. Jun Moxie, too, didn't speak anything after, and simply continued to watch the solitary falcon in a calm and composed manner. The solitary falcon was undoubtedly in need for this dan, and his requirement was urgent. A desperation breeds in the heart of a person who has reached the extent of his ability, and still has people ahead he wishes to, but can't chase down. Why else would a dignified man like the solitary falcon drop from his status and ask a kid to teach him martial arts? This itself was a proof conclusive of the fact that the solitary falcon had already reached his limits, but was still desperate to forge ahead. The solitary falcon wouldn't shy away from going to any extent or expending any kind of effort in order to procure such a dan, if one such existed. The solitary falcon was also aware that Jun Moxie wouldn't just present such a dan to him, like a gift without costs. Thus, the next topic on the discussion table would obviously be the conditions. They both understood that well. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 232. Operation begins. The solitary falcon was aware that he'd have to pay a huge price in order to obtain this dan. In fact, the solitary falcon was aware what this price would be. Thus, even though Jun Moxie still hadn't finished, it somehow seemed that there was no need for him to. Both men were well aware of what the condition would be. Even though the two pair of eyes were gazing into each other, seemingly in understanding, but the slight and quiet smile on their faces concealed the contest these two men were secretly having. A silent battle to see who's more impatient, to see who'd lose. And it stayed as such for a long, long time. Suddenly, the solitary falcon shook his head, laughed, sighed and said, "All I can say is that you can put forth any condition, because this offer is so tempting that I wouldn't wish to refuse. In fact, I can't refuse. And then there's you, attaining and maintaining this sort of temperament at such a young age is nothing short of miraculous. I, solitary falcon, have traveled the entire world. But if you ask me, I've never seen anything comparable to the tiny monster you are. However, I'm glad that I met you today. But, this time, you've miscalculated." Oh. The hitman's expression didn't waver in the slightest as he maintained his composure while slightly lifting his eyes. "No one in this world is capable of resisting the temptations of this marvelous medicine you speak of. As far as I'm concerned, I'm simply incapable of even denying that I can resist the temptation of advancing to the 6th level of the spirit Xian realm from my current 5th. The solitary falcon smiled, however, even though it's extremely difficult to resist. But this solitary falcon will never allow anyone to look down upon himself. I would never agree to these terms. Even if your master personally set them. Because I am the solitary falcon. The falcon of the savannah." A flame smoldered inside his eyes as he sneered, "I will only ever do the will of those gods who reside in the skies. Never become the slave of mere men. And there shall be no exceptions." "Well said." Jun Moxie gently applauded his words with a slight smile. "Perhaps Master Falcon misunderstands me. I've never asked for Master Falcon to become the slave of mere humans. But then, how could I be mistaken if I haven't stated my conditions yet?" He, young Master Jun. It seems that I've underestimated you even now. However, you cannot deny that this sentence of yours was the complete reverse of your thoughts. Can you? The solitary falcon was somewhat taunting now. "You're that kind of person who's willing to achieve his goals by fair means or foul. Moreover, you'd stubbornly seek to maximize your profits in case you see any. This, I'm confident, I couldn't have misunderstood." Jun Moxie was silent for a long time. Had he really underestimated one of the most capable men in the entire world? He had been manipulating everyone to his will ever since his reincarnation into this world. However, for the first time in this life, he found his confidence lacking, leaving him dumbstruck and speechless. The young Master Jun bitterly smiled as he said, "Master Falcon is right. I am such a person. You made no mistake in judging that about me. But, You do not agree with the words I haven't said, however. I can still help you in enhancing your cultivation as long as you promise to do just one thing for me. And if you promise, I will immediately try to inform my master to collect the raw material required for refining this dan. What's the condition? I'm listening. The solitary falcon didn't seem even the slightest bit excited, but appeared somewhat alert instead. The solitary falcon had been in touch with this youngster long enough to understand that taking advantage of his treacherous mind was harder than reaching the sky. Even though the benefits he provides are extraordinary, but he never acts without incentive, and hence the price he usually asks for are far above the market worth of his products. And thus, the solitary falcon couldn't help being on guard. However, unknowingly this turned his face gray in anticipation. I only ask that in case the Xiao family comes seeking to end this dispute and the Jun family goes to war with the Silver Blizzard City, you lend me a helping hand if I decide to rescue my third aunt. Jun Moxie's eyes shone brightly. It will be a rescue operation, but you'll be the killer on call. The solitary falcon paced back and forth about the room for a while as he pondered over it, and then finally clenched his teeth with determination. Good. Just this one thing. It's a deal. Jun Moxie smiled. However, at least a year after. If this happens before 1 year's time, then the deal won't be valid. The solitary falcon smiled proudly. I won't help if you ask me to do this within a year after the dan helps me make the breakthrough, because I won't have enough strength to execute this task. However, a year after, I will certainly be able to. Jun Moxie's face revealed a heartfelt smile for the first time. So be it. This one trait of the solitary falcon's character was the reason he had been able to keep up with Jun Moxie for so long. He'd never take advantage of anyone. However, no matter what, he'd never agree to be at a disadvantage. The solitary falcon walked away with 2 jars of wine. Jun Moxie retrieved that strange piece of jade from the Hongjun pagoda and carefully observed it for a while, but put it back since he was unable to understand its particulars. However, Jun Moxie could distinctly feel the Hongjun pagoda's odor becoming cleaner, fresher, and livelier as he returned that jade pendant to the pagoda, and could also sense the pagoda's aura becoming stronger and denser with the passage of time as the energies of these 2 strange artifacts continued to mix. Jun Moxie tugged his knees as he sat down, and started gazing at the moon outside the window as he immersed himself in his schemes. I need to find those 3 spirit herbs as soon as possible in order to enhance grandfather's cultivation level. Also, I need to figure out a safety route for saving his life in case something goes wrong. That's first. Second, this dan's refining is also beginning to turn into a pressing matter now. Whether it is solitary falcon or uncle, their strengths need to be enhanced as soon as possible. Plus, I can't neglect those people from the Tian Fa forest either. Third, I must urge Hai Chen-feng to start the unification of Tianxiang City's underworld factions as soon as possible. We must be sure to get a grasp over the knowledge of all activities inside the capital city. One task after another, none easier than the previous, had left the hitman frowning as he blankly continued to stare at the bright moon. As the oil lamp gradually started to set, the young Master Jun's silhouette got even lonelier in the dark of this night. Suddenly, a distinctive white figure appeared on the courtyard's wall. Though looking from afar, one could clearly see Jun Moxie's puckered eyebrows, a sight sufficient to deduce that this handsome youngster had been exhausting his thought and ingenuity, day and night for the sake of his family's future. This beautiful figure tenderly watched for a long time and then eventually sighed as she left, leaving behind only a hint of her fragrance. In the other partition of the courtyard, Jun Moxie sat leaning against the window, his eyes shut, and face hard with creases, his distressed eyebrows and unconsciously clenched teeth clearly exposed every tiny blood vein on his face, vividly illustrating the desolation of his heart. Hai Chunfeng's entire body seemed to resemble the waves of the blue seas as he gently drifted through the crowd comprising the dozen or so of the Jin Yang gang's finest members. The operation begins. The management wants to see the results before tomorrow's first light. The gentle moonlight bathed the weapons they held as the crowd silently raised them in the air, virtually infecting the steel with a faint, yet dark layer of a lustrous condensation of blood. A few people swiftly climbed over the walls from within the Li family's residence, divided into groups of two, and immediately disappeared into the dark of the night. Tonight was destined to be another bloody one for the Tianxiang city. One of the 6 major underworld factions, the Spirit Dragon Gang, had brought a disaster upon itself. Though the capital's 6 major underground factions had always been ranked in order of their might, but the disparity between the strengths of their primary forces wasn't much. Although the first-ranked Jin Yang Gang was obviously stronger than the bottom-ranking Northern City Gang, however, not by much, or at least, wasn't strong enough to overwhelm and subject them to its whims. Moreover, these 6 gangs also had an unwritten understanding between them, which had allowed them to coexist in a peaceful manner, since any conflict between these gangs could never result in one gang subduing the other. In case such an incident ever occurred, the remaining gangs would all team up against the aggressor. Today, however, the Spirit Dragon Gang received a message in reply from the Jin Yang Gang. The situation of these 6 gangs was getting more and more detrimental to their sake, since they were beginning to get surrounded by an increasing number of powerful families, which were constantly nibbling away the existing might of these gangs. In fact, the Northern City Gang had recently been exterminated in its entirety by Old Man Tang. Alarmed, anxious, and panic-stricken, the gangs were failing to carry out even the most basic of their operations. And thus, the Spirit Dragon Gang took the lead in raising the proposal for an alliance between the major gangs, hoping that they could all sail the storm in the same boat. Naturally, they wanted the most powerful gang, the Jin Yang Gang, as their main partner in this alliance. However, unfortunately, at the time they raised this proposal, the solitary falcon ran amok the Jin Yang Gang, beating Jin Feng Lai black and blue in the process, forcing the alliance initiative on a temporary hold. Today, however, the entire Spirit Dragon Gang was overjoyed upon receiving an unexpected reply from the Jin Yang Gang. But the replying letter was shredded soon after the Spirit Dragon Gang's leader Long Dahai was done reading its message. This letter demands that we surrender to their superiority and bid allegiance to them. This is simply too bold. Has he ever heard of a gang surrendering to another in these past 10 years since we first established ourselves? Jin Feng Lai, did you even consider that the 6 major gangs have always been on equal footing? Why would you dare to propose this? Seething with anger, Long Dahai immediately summoned the heads of his gang to discuss countermeasures. In fact, his personnel were so incited by this incident that a vast majority of them were even willing to fight the Jin Yang Gang to death, while many others were clamoring to use this opportunity for taking control of the Jin Yang Gang. However, the Spirit Dragon Gang's leader was staidly taking his time for making the decision as he considered his options. In this awfully noisy moment, the entrance door suddenly exploded with a boom, sending the wooden shavings flying in all directions. Several people were left wincing in pain as these wooden shavings cut their faces, drenching them in blood. Everyone furiously looked towards the entrance. A distinct blue light was radiating in the densely foggy night. The wooden shavings settled down. One man stood at the entrance. This, seemingly, blue-colored man, stood clad in blue-colored robes with his hands behind his back as his eyes calmly mapped the room in the radiance of his azure light. Even this man's eyes were as blue as the oceans. A Sky Xian expert. The Spirit Dragon Gang's members couldn't help crying out in alarm upon seeing a Sky Xian expert. A Sky Xian expert had arrived. The entire Spirit Dragon Gang was left shivering. May I dare to ask, sirs? Long Dahai's mustache trembled as he hastily stood up and asked in a respectful manner. The Jin Yang Gang shall rule the city's underworld. You have two choices: pledge allegiance or die. The blue-robed man's ice-cold eyes seemed a bit strange, like they were bathing in an inexplicable aura, as he slowly scanned the crowd again while making his statement. In fact, even his words seemed to be reeking in an acute aura of death. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 233. Subduing the Spirit Dragon Gang. The blood of the Spirit Dragon Gang members turned cold because of Hai Chenfeng's sharp Sky Xian aura. They felt like they were standing an asterisk ked on the summit of a snow-clad mountain, in the midst of the winter season, and were beset by extreme cold. It was as if icy knives had penetrated their flesh and were piercing down their very souls. So much so that it would sap any man's willpower, and even the strongest of souls could not hope to contend with such terrifying strength. Long Dahai's face turned pale as he stood facing Hai Chenfeng. It was as if the opposite party was a formidable mountain while he himself was just a small stone at its foot, which wasn't even qualified enough to fathom a means to look up at it. He took 5 or 6 steps backwards so that he could breathe a bit easier, but as he did, his back hit a wall with a loud bang, only to realize that he had retreated from the middle of the hall, and all the way to the innermost wall. What kind of pressure is this? Who are you, sire? Why is a person of such high skill siding with Jin Yang against our Spirit Dragon Gang? What is the need for your interference, sire? Long Dahai gathered courage and asked in a stern manner. Where is Jin Yang Gang's leader? Where is Jin Feng Lai hiding? Since he is attempting to gain control over my gang, why does he hide? Show yourself. Although his loud voice appeared majestic, and was intended to improve his position and make him look imposing, however, the slight tremble in it made it seem like he was begging the man in front. The Jin Yang Gang's boss is standing in front of you. When did I ever hide? Hai Chenfeng focused his stare as he raised his eyes and looked directly across the hall at Long Dahai's face, shrouding him in a murderous aura. Suddenly, Long Dahai's heart found itself shuddering. Just looking at Hai Chenfeng's eyes was painful for the Earth Xian strong Long Dahai. And even though there was a distance of about a dozen paces between him and Hai Chenfeng, the feeling of imminent death was very clear in his mind. And even though several members from the Spirit Dragon Gang were present in close proximity, he felt that in that huge space there was no one now who could give him a sense of security. He would have to face that tyrannical and sinister expert all on his own. A feeling of incomparable despair arose inside Long Dahai's heart. He felt his knees becoming weak with pain as he started to sweat profusely, feeling a sudden urge to kneel and submit. Hai Chenfeng, who was looking at the other party like an eagle, suddenly waved his arm and gave his blue cape a whirl. At that signal, a sound similar to the stampede of thousands of horses, charging all full gallop some distance away, was heard. Kill! There was a loud rumbling sound, and suddenly hundreds of men burst in carrying their glimmering swords in front of them, while on the walls several archers appeared with their arrows notched in their bows, surrounding the Spirit Dragon Gang. The tip of the arrows shone like the teeth of a smiling angel of death, illuminating the hall. Hai Chen-fong had stealthily eliminated the spies guarding the premises earlier on, without anyone getting to know about it. Swear allegiance now or die. If you do not comply, we will kill you all. I will count to 3, and if Long Dahai does not respond by then, you all will die no matter what you personally feel about this matter. Hai Chen-feng's eyes were cold as he said this and raised his right hand as a blue light appeared from the base of his raised finger. 1. Everyone from the Spirit Dragon gang started moving in panic. Altogether, they turned their eyes to look at Long Dahai, pleading him to rescue them. Boss. Their voices sounded like they were begging him. 2. Hai Chen-feng's cold expression didn't change even the slightest at doing this slovenly job as he sang the next number while raising his second finger, as if to the tune of some music. Long Dahai's face turned deathly pale as his lips trembled open. His eyes were filled with despair and helplessness. Archers, prepare. Hai Chen-fong, already looking furious, raised his arm as he gave the order in a tsunami-like voice. Arjihich, the archers answered in unison as they pulled the arrows on their bows, making them resemble a full moon. The moment Hai Chen-fong would say, 3, numerous arrows would rain down on their targets. Like angels of death, sent from the heavens, to bring upon imminent death. Now, resistance would only lead to death, and the only way they could survive would be to slow down. Long Dahai bellowed suddenly, though a trace similar to that of weeping lingered in his voice. I am willing to swear allegiance. He seemed to spit out these words as he slumped into a softball. The sweat-covered faces of his people showed utmost relief on hearing his words as they dropped their weapons one by one. It was like they had received a pardon from the death penalty. Good. Hai Chen-fong said approvingly. Since you have surrendered, we will be family from now on, and you will abide by its law. You are now in charge of the Spirit Dragon gang's operations. Yes. And comply with the boss's orders sincerely. A tall and sturdy silhouette came out of the shadows taking long strides. He had thick eyebrows. His mustache was like a dragon's. His extravagant nose and wide mouth resembled that of a lion. This man was no other than Jin Feng Lai. Jin Feng Lai. You. Long Dahai pointed at him unbelievingly, at a complete loss for words. Ha ha. Is it really that shocking that I have abdicated my position? Jin Feng Lai laughed in a carefree manner. Truth be told, Jin Feng Li did not really mind the fact that Hai Chen-fong had taken over his position as the gang's leader. That position was not as important as his friendship with Hai Chen-fong, and also, he figured that the Jin Yang gang would not risk any harm from Hai Chen-feng's leadership. It would only benefit from it. Such impressive might and xian qi. Conquering an entire gang just by using a few words. It is indeed very admirable of this xian expert. You are really extraordinary, sir. A solitary voice seemed to flutter in for a fleeting moment. It had an eccentric and sour tinge. Who is this? Hai Chen-fong asked, his gaze sweeping around the hall. His figure, covered in blue light, quickly flew up and proudly stationed itself on the rooftop. It's me, one of the men said with a sardonic smile as several archers cried out in alarm, falling down, while 2 black-clothed men replaced them on the wall, ferociously staring at Hai Chen-fong. The capital city is too big a pie for one gang to swallow whole on its own. Even if you try, you'll end up vomiting everything out. Hai Chen-feng's aura rose sharply, spreading the gorgeous blue light even further. Good that your distinguished self has made yourself heard. But the fact that the weak are eliminated by the strong is the basic rule of the game. Suddenly, his figure, bathed in blue light, flew to the sky and then shot towards the 2 men, covering the distance to them in a blink of an eye. and attacked them, which they were just barely able to avoid. The two men, clothed in black, laughed mockingly. A Sky Xian expert is quite hard to come by, right? In answer to that attack, the two men, also covered in blue light, shot up towards him and shouted in unison as they clashed together with their adversary, their clash culminating in fireworks. The three people floated backwards a little, stopped mid-air at the same time, and then maneuvered towards each other in order to attack again. Hai Chen-feng's face was reveling in a tranquil smile as his palms incessantly attacked his opponents, his deep blue xian qi appearing similar to a half-moon. Such attacks were like giant hatchets capable of cleaving mountains, and though these strong attacks left the two men struggling, they still weren't powerful enough to force them to retreat by even a bit. Suddenly, one of them retreated while hissing sharply, while the other man resorted to frantic counterattacks. In the meanwhile, the man who had retreated was now standing on the wall, covered in blue xian qi. Soon, his palms, along with the rest of his body, turned black, and he pointed one finger at Hai Chen-feng, who was still in the middle of a battle. Hai Chen-feng had been confident of coming out victorious even when faced with the both of them at once, so naturally he was sure of being able to better just the one he was faced against now. However, making quick work of a Sky Xian opponent wasn't possible for him as long as his own safety was a prerequisite. Thus, the fight was bound to continue a little while longer since he didn't wish to injure himself. Hai Chen-feng had, for the time being, attained a comprehensive advantage over his opponents and could easily win against them at any time he wished to. Then suddenly, a burst of cold air filled the atmosphere, staining the area with a pungent smell, which after assailing the nostrils, made everyone tremble fearfully. Then, retreating a bit after smelling the stench, Hai Chen-feng asked in a stern manner, "Is that the merciless cold-blooded finger of Master Li Wubei's school?" "Ha! How lucky we are that your arrogant self has recognized the merciless cold-blooded finger." The men clothed in black smiled. "And since you are aware of it, why don't you hurry up and go down on your knees to ask for forgiveness?" The men clad in black were the disciples of one of the 8 great masters, and they themselves were Sky Xian experts, and hence, obviously weren't weak. Also, the bold way in which they were acting showed their masters' backing in this endeavor of theirs. Hai Chen-feng didn't wish to offend Li Wubei. However, if he were to retreat now, he would certainly lose control over both the Jin Yang and the Spirit Dragon gangs. On the other hand, the two men in black had begun to count their chickens before they had even begun to hatch because they were sure of victory. It is very unfortunate that such wishful thinking does not come true in this world. "Come out with your nonsense." Hai Chen-feng cursed in anger because of the arrogance of the words spoken to him. He moved his hand behind his back and unsheathed a long double-edged sword, which came out with a ringing sound as he once again rushed towards his enemies like a crashing wave. It seemed like the sky-blue waves of his aura were mixed with the silvery and snowy spray of his sword as he attacked them. The blue snowstorm sword. "So you are the Blue Master's disciple," laughed the men clad in black. "This is good. Now we can finally see which of our schools is superior, and which is inferior." Hai Chen-feng got even angrier upon hearing this. He was confident of defeating the two men on his own and had originally planned to leave them lying around. However, they had used a formidable move, and he did not want them to recklessly attack and risk their lives as they were his brother disciples. Therefore, he had drawn his sword in order to deter them, though, opposed to his expectations, they continued to act arrogantly even after that. He was unaware that Li Jianhong had promised to help Li Yuran in unifying the capital's underworld, and that these two men were his fellow disciples. They had made their first move tonight, though it turned out that they were a step behind. However, they couldn't back away now, even if they had to face Hai Chen-feng as a result. If they were unable to gain control over these gangs, they would not be able to face their elder brother, and perhaps even the little master, ever again. So even if they were aware of the relationship between the parties involved, they couldn't give up. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 234. Silver Blizzard City. Although the two men had judged that Hai Chen Feng was stronger than them, but they had also guessed that he neither intended nor dared to act rashly, and was in fact trying to avoid severely injuring them. As a result, he was being cautious and wasn't attacking them blindly. The two men simply couldn't believe their luck. At the same time, Hai Chen Feng too had realized that the two black-clothed men weren't even remotely grateful for the mercy he was showing them. Therefore, he couldn't help getting angrier each time he was attacked. Then suddenly, his sword gleamed brightly, and his body shot towards his opponents like a comet. As he shouted, "This place is not appropriate for fighting. Do the cold-blooded master's disciples have the courage to follow me to a more suitable place?" The two men laughed. "Good. Then the one who loses will desist from trying to conquer the capital's underworld." The three figures, covered in blue light, then disappeared from sight in the blink of an eye. Long Dai Hai and Jin Feng Lai were both Earth Xian experts, and wouldn't be considered weak. However, they couldn't help but be dazzled at the spectacle of these three experts engaged in a battle above them. Seeing the three depart, Jin Feng Lai energetically patted Long Dahai's shoulders. "Let's go and discuss the arrangements to be made for our gang." Jin Feng Lai was a veteran of the underworld, and although he could not discern which among the parties was weaker, he had known Hai Chen Feng for a long time, and after hearing the dialogue between him and the two men, was confident that his friend had the upper hand, and hence felt no need to worry. It was only then that Long Dahai opened his eyes, which he had shut earlier due to fear, and after understanding his counterpart, with a grunt, walked inside with him. In the extreme north of the land lay the Silver Blizzard City. There were snow-capped mountains in all directions as far as the eye could see. In the middle of the vast and misty uninhabitable peaks was a magnificent, mysterious and unpredictable city of pure ice, seemingly overlooking the entire world from the secrecy of the clouded snow-covered peaks. It was not yet daybreak, and the sky was still dark when the bell to convene rang out. The loud echoes of the bell disrupted the seemingly perpetual tranquility of the place, and the many pure white birds which were sitting in the area suddenly shot up like rockets, scared away by the sudden drum beats. Their cries filled the sky as they circled above for a very long time without coming down. The base of the main building was made of pure ice, and inside the hall, on a wall of snow-white bricks, was a portrait of people in white clothes. The posture of each of them was different. However, each of them revealed the same look on their face, one of pride and cold power. Their eyes were godlike and full of murderous aura, and it seemed like they had power over life and death, and could seize anything they wanted. In fact, they seemed so powerful that they considered everyone else below them. They were the Silver Blizzard City's ancestors. The hall was quite big, so much so that even if hundreds of people were to dine in it, still no one would feel that the place was overcrowded. A white-clothed old man, with white hair and beard, stood in front of the incense table with his hands behind his back, silently looking at the portrait of the ancestors, and on his face was an expression as tranquil as calm water and as cold as ice. And even though his hair was white, he had a straight back and a proud chest. He stood erect like a shaft of a formidable blade, all the while emitting a cold sword-like aura. No one could doubt that this old man was hiding immense power within him. In fact, it seemed that his strength could shake the earth, surpassing all his peers. Then, the swishing sound of many clothes overcame the silence in the hall as many white-clad people entered it rapidly from all directions, and assembled in a manner which indicated that each already had a predetermined position to stand on. And even in that huge crowd, no one bumped into each other and only a word or two could be heard being spoken. In a short while, everyone settled down in their respective positions and all eyes turned towards the old man standing in the center. And though they were all a bit surprised at being called like this, no one uttered a single word thereafter. Blue lights emanated from their bodies. There were nearly 100 people there, and all of them were at least Sky Xian experts. Just then, sound of approaching footsteps was heard as 7 old men entered in a line, walking unhurriedly on the floor made of the 10,000 years old mysterious ice. Each and every step of these 7 elderly men was very calm when they walked in, and they stationed themselves behind the old man who still stood quietly in the center. An individual clad in white was standing at the door in graceful poise. His eyes twinkled and a power radiated all around him as he appeared at the door and stood proudly. It seemed that all the land under the heavens, including everyone in the hall, existed solely to be his dominion. At his side, his partner, a beautiful middle-aged woman, was nestled against him like a frail willow. Their looks were unrivaled. The man looked like a confident hero who stood above everyone else, and the woman had a grace and style unlike anyone in her generation. The bystanders were admiring the couple, looking at them with envy for their perfect match. Everyone inside the hall turned to the couple the moment they entered, and bowed. "Welcome, city's master and mistress. It is a pleasure to see you. You needn't be so polite." The two replied with a hint of a smile on their faces as they unhurriedly proceeded to the middle of the hall, and sat down on the only 2 chairs in this huge space, which was capable of seating hundreds of people. Only these 2 were qualified enough to sit on chairs inside this hall. These 2 were the lords of the city, the heavenly sword of ice, Han Zhanmeng, and his wife, the far-soaring frost, Xue Shuangqing. The old man then waved his hand and said, "You have been invited here because of a matter that is extremely important for this city's future. Everyone below the Spirit Xian realm may go outside and stand guard. Allow no one to come closer than 50 meters of this place. If anyone tries, kill them without exception." "Yes. We will sincerely obey the elder's command," they answered in a chorus, and after cupping their hands, slowly left the hall. Less than 10 of the initially addressed were left, and suddenly the hall seemed quite empty with less than 20 people present at the moment. "Does this matter concern Tianxiang City?" Han Zhanmeng smiled at the elder. Otherwise, Elder Xiao Xingyun would not have taken such precautions. "It is just as the master has guessed. There is news from Tianxiang City. See, master. The 3rd elder has sent a message, and one of our snow eagles has flown through the night to deliver to us this astonishing news," the elder replied as he opened a roll of parchment and handed it over. Han Zhanmeng shook his head lightly and chuckled as he took the snow-white parchment, while Xue Shuangqing leaned in close to him to read as well, both curious to see what this astonishing news really was. But as the 2 people sitting read the message, their calm expressions slowly turned serious, and soon their smiles also vanished. The beautiful woman's flowery face lost its color and became pale, though there was a hint of happiness present there as well. Still, her smile faded and was replaced by a worried expression, and she could not help but grasp her husband's hands, as if to warn him about something. "This is unexpected news. Everyone, have a look and give your opinion." Han Zhanmeng finished reading and closed his eyes as he felt Xue Shuangqing grabbing his arm, seemingly cautioning him of something as he waved the letter for everyone to read. "Solitary Falcon is watching over the Jun family, and has severely injured the 6th elder. A mysterious master severely injured Feng Wu. And the latter also snatched away the sixth elder's soul-replenishing jade, and no one could resist him? How is this possible? Everyone exclaimed in bewilderment, crowing around, each trying to get a better look. So many events have taken place in these past few days. Elder Xiao Xingyun smiled coldly. Also, that arrogant kid from the Jun family, who thinks too much of himself, has somehow been cured of his disability. This is really a rare occurrence. Han Zhanmeng sat silently for a moment before looking at the great elder and asked, "The elder has called everyone here today, thus, I'm presuming he has a plan?" This person could formulate many plans, but the final decision has always been up to the city's master, and he decides how to act on such plans. The elder bowed respectfully and retreated half a step. Great Elder is a very important member of the city. What does he suggest? Han Zhanmeng did not beat around the bush and directly came to the point. Despite his status in the society, the solitary falcon has taken it upon himself to seriously injure and insult the sixth elder for no reason. This act must be punished severely. If this news got out, then what would happen to the prestige of our city? We cannot take this matter lightly, the great elder said in an unhurried manner. The great elder had, shockingly, suggested punishing one of the 8 great masters. However, all those present nodded in agreement because in the eyes of the elders of the Silver Blizzard City, even the 8 great masters, including the Falcon of the Savannah, were not very important. This clearly showed how terrifyingly powerful the Silver Blizzard City was. This is a given. Do you have another plan in mind? Han Zhanmeng nodded lightly, with a blank expression on his face. Yes. The soul-replenishing jade is an extremely important heirloom of my Xiao family. Its efficacy is extraordinary and can be considered to transcend the mortal realms. Therefore, it must certainly not fall into the hands of an outsider. The retrieval of this jade is absolutely necessary, and there can be no compromise on this. It is of supreme importance that we get it back. The great elder's eyes flashed, and it was clear that he was very angry at the loss of the soul-replenishing jade. We must take our time to consider this point. Because if what the third elder says is true, then we cannot be sure of this mysterious person's strength. And if such is the case, then even if all of us go together to confront him, we may still not necessarily be able to retrieve the soul-replenishing jade. Thus, we must be careful not to jeopardize so many lives for such a mission. Han Zhanfeng lightly knocked on the chair's armrest, his eyelids half closed as he said this. The master's concern in this regard is justified. We must certainly not give caution to the wind while deploying our people, and we should also avoid conflict with this mysterious man as far as possible. However, the third elder is not yet a first-rate spirit Xian expert, and his assumptions may not be necessarily correct. Even if compared to the solitary falcon, the difference in their strength would be similar to that of heaven and earth. Therefore, his speculations may be far more exaggerated than the truth. Also, he claims that not only is the mysterious master stronger than the city's old master, but also Yun Bei Chen. How can this be possible? This shows that the information in this letter may not be entirely correct. The great elder knit his white eyebrows as he slowly spoke these words. He then continued, "In any case, we should send someone to verify this news. If this person really is that strong and unpredictable, we will inquire more about him. However, if it turns out that he is not a threat, we must immediately recapture the soul-replenishing jade from him." Great Elder is truly wise, and his suggestion is the best option in this matter. Han Zhanmeng said while looking at the elder appreciatively. Still, it seems that you have a third plan in mind? Yes, I do. The great elder raised his white eyebrows. This Jun family is just a worldly family. And yet it has repeatedly provoked our Silver Blizzard City. This cannot be tolerated anymore. I suggest that we completely wipe out that entire family as a warning to the rest of the world against making light of our Silver Blizzard City's power. Saying this, the Great Elder extended his right hand and made a decisive and destructive downward gesture. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 235. The Seven Swords of the Silver City. On hearing the plans for the Jun family, Xue Shuangqing immediately became tense and clenched her husband's arm tightly, unable to bear it anymore. This cannot be done. Han Zhanmeng's eyebrows suddenly arched like two sharp swords which had been unsheathed quickly. I don't have any problem with the Great Elder's first two plans, but I will not agree to the extermination of the entire Jun family. Moreover, wasn't the suffering we had to endure 10 years ago, the first time this plan was put into play, enough? Han Zhanmeng looked coldly at the elder and continued solemnly. 10 years ago, many of the Xiao family's spirit Xian experts secretly went off to deal with the Jun family and involved themselves in the war of two other nations without even taking permission. And because of this, the Jun family came to the verge of ruin. And even though I put a stop to all of it, the Jun still suffered 3 successive attacks. As a result, the only surviving member of their second generation was crippled, while only a debauchee was left in their third. It doesn't matter what you say, this is too much. No matter what, the Jun family is good and faithful, and the grudge between your families is your personal matter. So why are involving the rest of us? Also, I could not understand the Great Elder's words from the very beginning. What did you mean when you said that the Jun family has repeatedly provoked my Silver Blizzard City and questioned its power? The only one which seems to have been provoked is the Xiao family. This matter will not be mentioned again. And if anyone else decides to go forth in order to deal with the Juns without permission, the same will be punished according to the city's laws. No mercy will be shown to them. But now the Jun family has got 2 powerful individuals supporting it, and sooner or later, they are going to create big problems for the Silver Blizzard City. Anyway, even if we don't take the initiative to deal with the Jun family ourselves, they will certainly try to harm the Silver Blizzard City in order to avenge what they've suffered in the past, owing to our animosity. Whether it was right or wrong, we killed 4 important members of the Jun family, and though it was a mistake, crippled one of them, nothing can change this fact. An animosity which is carried forward from generation to generation cannot be dissolved this easily. Will my Xiao family have to stretch its neck and bear the Jun family's resentment for the Silver Blizzard City's future, all alone? The Great Elder's face clearly showed his indignation. The actions taken by the Xiao family, in the past, are the root cause of this problem. Does the Great Elder really wish to add to the list of mistakes which have already been made, and commit more wrongs thereafter? The Great Elder is willing to bleed us all, forever, simply because of the mutual feelings harbored by 2 young ones. You are completely mistaken. They are good men, and they will not be killed needlessly because of this. Such madness will not be allowed in my Silver Blizzard City. This matter has been in dispute for 10 years. And in 10 years, it has only seen stalemates. I have no interest in discussing it again. Han Zhanmeng gazed coldly as he looked up. Great Elder, if the Jun family truly, and seriously, attacks the Silver Blizzard City in order to extract their revenge, then you do whatever you feel like, and I will not meddle therein. However, unless the Jun family attacks us first, we will not do anything. The Jun family taking on the Silver Blizzard City? That is a big joke. It is just another family, without any significant capability, Will it not be akin to courting their own death? Even in 100 years, the Jun will not have enough strength to pose a threat to the Silver Blizzard City. A tall and thin elder snorted. He was named Xiao Buyu, and was in fact the second elder of the city. If the Jun family is really that weak, then why is the Xiao family so worried? Han Zhanmeng stared coldly. The thing is that your eldest daughter Yao isn't young anymore, and is still unmarried. And if this continues. Looking at Han Zhanmeng's stubborn resistance to his proposal, the great elder decided to change the direction of his argument instead of insisting upon the same thing. This matter requires further consideration. Han Zhanmeng's face appeared as if he was having a headache. Great elder, have you forgotten what happened 10 years ago? Do you really want Yao to go mad? Do you really wish to force her into torment herself to death again? You've always loved her like she was your own granddaughter. Are you really so heartless that you'll do this to her? On hearing this, the great elder sighed sadly, but didn't speak anymore. 10 years ago, when Han Yanyao had returned to the Silver Blizzard City, she went mad and destroyed her meridians in front of Han Zhanmeng upon finding out the treatment the Juns had received at the hands of the Xiao family. She had sworn that she would live and die with the Jun family. The image of her blood staining the entire floor was still very vivid in everyone's mind. This was why Han Zhanmeng was so vehemently opposed to Great Elder's plan to eliminate the Jun family. No one had forgotten the hardships that were faced to save Han Yanyao from the clutches of her death. At that time, the Great Elder had presumed that given her weak physical condition, she wouldn't be able to harm her meridians any further, and thus, he had decided to go ahead with his plan to deal with the Jun family again. However, on learning this, that stubborn girl pierced herself with 2 swords, right up to the shaft, and stood covered in blood from head to toe in front of the elders, and demanded that they immediately withdraw their orders. As a result, the great elder was rendered helpless and was forced to cancel his secret plan to destroy the Jun family. However, Han Yanyao's recklessness had already put her life at a great risk, and because of that, the old master of the city had gone into a fit of rage. And even Han Zhanmeng and his wife were furious with the Xiao family. It was then that the first signs of dispute between these 2 families of the Silver Blizzard City had started to appear. Naturally, only a very few important people within the Silver Blizzard City had any knowledge of this incident, while outsiders were completely unaware of what had happened. Tracking the conversation back, wouldn't teaching a lesson to the solitary falcon be a huge blow to the Jun family? The Jun family will not be able to rise again after that, and therefore, there will be no need to exterminate them anymore. Saying this, Han Zhanmeng sighed and his gaze swept the hall as he looked outside at a solitary snow-capped peak in the distance, and then wondered in his heart, Yao, your father can do only this much for you right now. The rest, you can just hope. In that case, I would like to make some arrangements. Although the great elder did not agree with Han Zhanmeng, he had no option but to relent. This time, the capable second brother will lead the 5th and the 8th elder. And to make our efforts foolproof, I would like to request that the old master of the city shall allow them to take the 7 swords with them as well. After all, if the mysterious person actually turns out to be that formidable, then wouldn't the 7 swords provide extra assurance? Good. It is decided then. As for the remaining matters, I give the great elder full authority to make arrangements. Hearing this, Han Zhanmeng rubbed his forehead, got up, and started to move out of the hall with his wife. But just as he had reached the gate, he turned his head and warned, in any case, no one is to involve themselves with the Jun family, and if anyone disobeys this order, I will make sure to send a report to my father. And I can promise, that man will be expelled from the Silver Blizzard City. Without any exceptions, After saying this, the two leisurely walked away. This left the great elder standing there expressionless for a moment. And though he continued standing calmly rooted to his spot, a trace of anger could be seen flashing in his eyes. Then, he suddenly turned towards Xiao Buyu. You will make preparations to descend the mountains this afternoon. Act immediately and without fail. Elder brother, so, what about the Jun family issue? Xiao Buyu asked, wrinkling his silvery eyebrows. There will be many opportunities for you to make use of in order to complete that task. Xiao Xingyun took a deep breath and replied in an expressionless tone. And after you get down, do what you think is necessary. Yes. Outside the hall, Xue Shuangqing patted her stomach, letting go of some of her worries, though some concerns still lingering in her mind. Thank you, dear husband. If you had not insisted, then perhaps the Jun family would have been annihilated, and if such a thing were to happen to them, I fear that Yao. Even though I have stopped things from progressing any further for now, Yao's still got a lot of problems. We can only help her one step at a time. Han Zhanmeng sighed deeply and looked up to the heavens as he quietly said, Our daughter has suffered a lot of pain in the last decade. And as her father, how can I let her last source of hope be extinguished? No matter what, no one will ever harm my daughter. Nor my family. Han Zhanmeng said in a low voice. And as he waved his arm from his sleeves, a huge ice rock suddenly shattered into tiny pieces, which scattered into the air like snowflakes. Xue Shuangqing nestled against her husband, and suddenly felt a sense of security warming her heart. She felt that as long as her husband's broad and sturdy shoulders held the burdens, no harm would come to either of her two precious daughters, and thus, she could not help but smile satisfyingly. Inside a cave of a solitary peak not far from the hall stood a lone and frail woman, dressed in white clothes and a mask. She opened a letter with her lily-white hands and read it very quickly, but the moment she finished reading the letter, her fingers started to tremble while her eyes started to brim with tears. Is he really? His injury has really healed. Thank God. The woman dressed in white cried tears of joy as her slender body bent forward while her shoulders trembled like dead leaves in the wind. Her heart had become very cold during the past 1 decade. However, this letter had finally broken through that ice, and her now precarious mental state was clearly reflecting the weakness and the helplessness she had been feeling all these years. With tears in her eyes, the woman in white sobbed softly for a while, but then, she suddenly stood up and walked over to the mouth of the cave. She knelt down with her hands cupped in devotion and looked up to the heavens as she prayed in a soft voice. Thank God, for he has completely recovered. Thank God, for he is no longer in pain. Give him happiness. This woman will trade 10 or even 20 years of her life for his safety and happiness. Even if we can't be together, I am still your Yao, forever. She gently prayed on the ground, and as her plea quietly faded in the blowing wind, a strong gale arose from the heavens above, and kept getting stronger and stronger, without relenting. The waves of snowflakes started becoming bigger and denser, and started to fall down upon the mountains with much more ferocity than before. And though this lone woman on that snowy peak was completely covered in snow soon, she remained motionless, kneeling in prayer as her unceasing tears fell on the floor and froze. However, not long after this, 10 shadowy figures shot skyward and flew out of the Silver City. They descended down the mountains, hidden by wind and snow. Inside the Jun family residence, Fatty's ghost-like howls woke up the young master of the house very early in the morning. He was dragged from his bed by Fatty. And when he opened his eyes, he saw that the Fatty was covered in black clothes from head to toe, and surprisingly, seemed to be in good spirits. Moreover, The fatty also appeared somewhat thinner than before. Now he looked like a man, at least a little bit. And not just that. His face was scrubbed clean and his hair was unexpectedly neat, while his body was giving off a faint hint of a honey locust's fragrance. After looking at his face, one could see that he had applied a lot of cosmetic powder. This fatty had actually covered his face with cosmetic powder. And that too, with a very thick layer. Bluewurg. Jun Moxie burst out retching. Fatty. That much powder on your face looks scary because of your body type. You know that, right? Are you trying to play the role of a ghost with such a thick layer of cosmetic powder on your face? And why did you wake me up so early in the morning? He looked out the window to see the early glimmer of dawn. Third young master, brother. Tang Yuan was being uncharacteristically bashful. Did you not promise that you'll accompany me to meet the Sun family's young miss? Miss Sunday, oh. That Miss Sun? Jun Moxie realized suddenly. And stood up. Isn't she your fiancé? The one you had once lost while gambling? Bullsh *T. Fatty retorted in a somewhat fiery manner. Is it possible that you wouldn't mention that matter before her? Haven't I always stayed away from such despicable things since then? He said as sized himself up. Looking quite satisfied. I look thinner. Pretty good, right? Yes, really slim. In fact, you almost look like a person. Jun Moxie whipped out from the corner of his mouth. You really are looking very slim. In fact, I am truly confused. Tang Yuan opened his big mouth and let out a loud and narcissistic laugh. Then, he swirled around twice, thinking he looked very elegant. However, this swirling movement ruined whatever arrangements he had done in order to look slimmer. As a result, his belly drooped down again, which then flew out like a flexible elastic bag, followed his axial rotation, and then changed its direction once again as he stopped, only to drop down to slap his thighs and knees. I'm meeting Miss Sun for the first time. I must make a good impression on her. A look of longing and happiness flashed in Tang Yuan's eyes while his pupils almost resembled the shape of a heart. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 236. Fatty's Blind Date. Jun Moxie couldn't bear to witness the spectacle and groaned. However, he was quite curious and wondered, what kind of woman would bear with this nearly 250 kg of fat? They ate breakfast with their eyes narrowed. Then they opened them big and wide as they stared in wait for the appointed time to arrive. They called out a big bodyguard when it was almost time and left to meet the beautiful woman. Third young master. What if your words comes true? And the Sun family's granddaughter doesn't like me because I am fat and heavy? Tang Yuan's mind was full of worries. He passed gas onto the horse he was riding as a result of the mental pressure. The horse flared his nostrils up in complaint. The foam forming at the corners of its mouth was proof of its distress. Jun Moxie hummed in response. While his eyes were patrolling the street, he had an absent-minded look on his face. Fatty Tang, on the other hand, had completely failed to notice the distracted look on the young Master Jun's face. He anxiously looked down at his own fat, and let out a sigh as a thought suddenly crossed his mind. He violently turned his body, faced his friend, and asked in excitement, Third young master, you said that if I lost weight, will it work if you supervise me? Just as he wiggled the horse under his but neighed in pain, while the four of its hooves were left trembling. The laboriously panting horse angrily turned its head and gave a mortified look to show its resentment. Then it reduced its speed further. It seemed that Fatty Tang had twisted the horse's lower back in the process of turning his waist. I will start assisting you in losing weight as soon as your injury is fully healed. Jun Xie replied with a smile on his face, then touching his chin. He continued, "We can make you as thin as bean sprouts." "Well, then it will certainly please you to know that I would look very handsome if I weren't so fat." Tang Yuan pinched his fingers as he made a gesture towards Jun Xie while looking at him in a flirtatious manner. "Hiya." Jun Xie suddenly cracked a whip at his horse's back and dashed ahead. He then turned his head and spat in disgust. Fatty Tang's coquettish expression was like a murderous weapon. It was just too much. "She is meeting you here? Now isn't that surprising?" Jun Xie opened his eyes wide as he looked at the restaurant ahead. "Your fiancé has decided to meet you in this restaurant? I am really surprised. Or was it you who proposed to meet here?" "It wasn't me. I didn't think of meeting her in a restaurant, though I believe it's a very good idea." Tang Yuan looked at Jun Xie in a bewildered manner, and then asked, "What do you find so strange about it?" "What's strange? A man meeting another in a restaurant can be considered quite natural. But a woman meeting her fiancé, it's quite out of the ordinary." Jun Xie clicked his tongue twice as he said, "Fatty, it seems that your future wife is very different from the women of this era." "Oh. I guess she should have picked a brothel instead." Tang Yuan flipped his eyelids as his nostrils flared, clearly showing that he scoffed at his companion's opinion. Jun Xie wasn't even able to find the time to reply suddenly. From the restaurant, a white shadow quickly flew towards him and in a moment was standing on his shoulder. The speed of this white shadow was no less than a high-ranking expert's. He didn't get any time to react in the face of such a sudden attack, and was forced to allow the white creature to settle onto his shoulder. The tiny animal made a whining noise before sliding to the pit of the Jun Xie's stomach. Then, with a grunt, it embraced Jun Xie's chest, floundered a bit, and attached itself to his clothes. It then extended its tiny head to Jun Xie's now exposed collarbone and nestled against it, remaining motionless thereafter, just like placing oneself in the most intimate and secure embrace. Jun Xie had sensed this white creature long ago owing to his keen sensing abilities. "Whoa! What are you doing here, you tiny thing?" he asked softly as he clutched the creature's ear that was clinging to his chest. Naturally, this tiny animal was none other than Dugu Xiaoyi's iron-winged panther. It seemed quite obvious that the creature had gained a lot of weight over the very short period Jun Xie hadn't seen him in. Moreover, there was a small protrusion around a couple of its ribs. Iron-winged panthers were only capable of growing wings when their strength reached close to adulthood. Even then, they could only grow wings made of flesh. This young cub, however, had already begun to grow vestigial wings. Even though it was barely a month old, its potential was truly limitless. The little creature looked up with its watery eyes on hearing his dear young master. Then, whining twice, it stuck out its small pink tongue and started licking his dear young master's chest and neck. It then turned once and again started to search for Jun Xie's neck with its tiny claws. The little cub's face lit up with happiness upon finding its desired target. Looking at it, one would think that it would cling to Jun Xie for the next 500 years. However, that little thing could also somehow comprehend that Jun Xie was on guard and might throw it away. This little thing is very dear to that girl. If it's here, that means. Jun Xie shook his head, for he didn't need to ponder any further. If this little thing was here, then it meant that Dugu Xiaoyi was most likely to be around as well. Thinking about that unruly little girl gave Jun Xie a headache. The young master Jun hadn't yet gotten the opportunity to meet several of the Tianxiang city's residents, such as Tianxiang Empire's emperor. However, the emperor was someone he may not necessarily like to meet. On the other hand, there was another list, comprising of people the young Master Jun simply didn't wish to meet. Debauchee was one of the names on this particular list. However, he had already arrived at the door and couldn't retreat at this point. Therefore, lacking a better option, the young Master Jun called Fatty Tang over and braced himself as both men dismounted from their horses and walked inside. They were completely unaware that the mountain path they were about to take would turn out to be a tiger trail. Apparently, the other party had taken great pains in reserving the entire hall for this meeting between their family's granddaughter and the young Master Tang. Moreover, there was only one table for the guests, and it was placed right in the center. Two guests were already seated around it at the moment. One of the two, the petite figure wearing a light green vest, was obviously Debauchee. This was apparent from the way her braided hair waved to and fro as she spoke. However, who was that man sitting with her? The person sitting beside Debauchee had a stocky build, wide shoulders, thick arms and slightly thinning hair. Just looking at him, one could tell that he was a formidable personage. Apparently, the Dugu family was still uneasy about this meeting, and had sent one of Debauchee's elder brothers to act as a bodyguard, just to be on the safer side. But which out of the heroes and legends bravely rushing forward was this one? His mannerism was much better than the other Dugu brothers. Jun Moxie's sharp eyes were unable to determine which one of the 7 heroes and legends bravely rushing forward this man was. Could it be that the Dugu family has an 8th son? Tang Yuan and the young Master Jun had just entered through the door. However, on seeing those two, felt that there was something fishy going on as they walked towards them. Jun Moxie patted his forehead. He was here for Tang Yuan's blind date, not his own. But where was the Sun family's granddaughter? No other woman was present there besides Debauchee. He couldn't tell why, but suddenly, an inexplicable feeling of dread arose within his heart. With his mind abuzz, the young Master Jun thought of something improbable, but dismissed it immediately. He then suddenly pulled Fatty by his sleeves and asked in a subdued tone, "Fatty, your fiancée, the young miss from the Sun family, you've never seen her before, right?" Tang Yuan's palms were sweating with nervousness since he had been planning to leave a good impression on his fiancée. Feeling weak upon getting pulled like this, he replied to Jun Moxie in a soft voice once he had turned his fat head and had sized himself up again. "No, but my fiancée is graceful and ladylike. We have just entered this place, how can we be sure if no one else is here, right?" Tang Yuan finished explaining, and moved closer to Jun Moxie's ear as he continued. "However, I guess what I've heard from people is correct because I once overheard my grandfather talking about the Sun family's granddaughter as well. He would have definitely made a good judgment with his strong foresight." "What did your grandfather say?" Jun Moxie was awfully curious. "My grandfather said the Sun family's granddaughter has a very fat ass, and I will be sure of having a son. The two of you can be considered a perfect match." Saying this, Tang Yuan laughed in an obscene manner, while his 2 eyebrows pulsated repeatedly in excitement. "Third young master, you may not know this, but I am very fond of women with big butts like my fiancées. However, my dream woman, he. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes and turned to walk inside. He had already had enough of that obscene fatty. The fatty's fiancé, however, had his sympathy. Still, what sort of a girl would make a perfect match for this fatty? The Sun family hadn't cancelled the engagement despite Fatty's disgusting behavior over the years. All this seemed very unusual to him. The young Master Jun was pondering over this strange matter, when a sudden and loud voice left him shocked. "Jun! Brother Moxie! You actually came. Xie took the initiative and welcomed him with excitement. I had figured that you will accompany Fatty here. So I also came along with my elder sister Sunday. My guess was right. You really came. Jun Moxie shivered from head to toe. Xie had just called him Brother Moxie for the first time. A chill went through his body as he thought about it. Why is this little girl being so polite? Young Miss Dugu. It was fated that I have the pleasure of meeting you here. But our real purpose in coming here is to meet your sister, the Sun family's granddaughter. So where is she? Jun Moxie replied quickly, aiming to find more about her plans in order to be certain. You're still calling me young Miss Dugu? Xie looked at him bitterly and pouted. Meanwhile, Jun Moxie's hand went up to his chest, and he pulled out Little White from underneath his clothes. The cub was still clutching him tightly, refusing to leave him. Xie, on the other hand, continued to purse her lips. Did you not? Tang Yuan had been drooling over his fiancée ever after hearing about her. He stretched his neck to look for the beautiful woman, but couldn't spot any females apart from Xie. Meanwhile, that stocky-looking person was now pouring himself a drink. Just then, a thought hit Jun Moxie. Is that the Sun family's granddaughter? The young master Jun thought to himself, Grandpa Tang was right. These two would make a perfect pair. They are truly a match made in heaven. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 237. Strangely heroic woman. Fatty was still a bit suspicious as this well-built rose and strolled towards them. Though this person wasn't very tall, but anyone could tell that their figure was exceptionally sturdy. The person smiled widely as he cupped his fists calmly and candidly spoke. You must be Jun family's third young master. And the person with you is my future husband, Tang Yuan. This young woman is Sun Xiao Mei. Tang Yuan was briefly dumbfounded. His eyes nearly popped out from their sockets, while his jaw almost dropped to the ground. This man was actually a woman. Her thick eyebrows atop big eyes wouldn't exactly look ugly from normal standards if they hadn't been placed on that big forehead of hers. Surprisingly, this woman had even tied her hair in a manly topknot. She hadn't applied a whiff of cosmetic products, and was less of any jewelry. She stood cupping her hands in a posture that seemed as steady as stagnant water. Even her voice was ear-splitting and resounding, like that of a powerful expert. Her ass really isn't small. She is exactly Fatty's type. Your grandfather had spoken the truth. The two of you really do make a perfect match, a natural pair. Young Master Jun didn't know what to say. Therefore, left with no other option, he just prevented himself from laughing out loud, and awkwardly cupped his hands. He then congratulated Fatty in a low voice. Oh hey! Tang Yuan looked like he had been struck by lightning. His small eyes were now as big as a buffalo's. His big mouth was stretched to the root of his ears, while saliva of despair had already started to drip from it. Suddenly a sound started emanating from his throat. Caw, caw, caw. Like someone was chalking a chicken. Then, his eyes rolled upwards as if he had hanged himself from a jade pillar. But his expression soon changed to that of dizziness. It almost seemed as if that jade pillar had refused to bear his weight, and he had ended up hitting his head against the ground with a bang. Tang Yuan had fantasized a lot about his fiancée Sun Xiao Mei, the Sun family's granddaughter. He had always thought that she would be the best candidate for his fiancée's role. However, the difference between the fantasies of his dream lover and the reality was far more that the pitiful Tang Yuan could bear. This shock was like a cruel blow which would leave one to vomit, lose consciousness, and then eventually fall to the ground. Apparently, this young woman has given quite a scare to my honored fiancé. The Sun family's granddaughter mocked herself. Though there was a hint of sorrow in her eyes, she managed to conceal quickly. Then, she said in a straightforward manner after sizing up Tang Yuan, "My future husband is quite fat. He needs to lose weight." Cupping her fist in her hands, she made a gesture by extending them forward as she continued, "Third young Master Jun, kindly take a seat." Young Master Jun had figured out the truth much before Fatty Tang. However, his first impression of Sun Xiaomei wasn't really good. It was important to note that Fatty, though intolerable, was still the heir to an important family of the city. Thus, his wife's morality and conduct shouldn't be anything like Sun Xiaomei's. It wasn't to look down upon the notion of women, but women were considered to be a man's vassals in this era's setting. Most men would find her unsightly appearance to be a defect. However, her each and every shortcoming would fall short in front of her amazingly bold attitude. Jun Moxie had started to form a favorable opinion of the Sun Xiaomei even though he had just met her. A fact which was evident from the sincere shade of admiration in his eyes. For him, there was nothing to fuss over about this woman apart from her height and build. In short, she could be described as a woman who was a match for men. By just a word or two, one could sense that her temperament and efficiency in dealing with things surpassed that of the majority of men. She would surely have been a man with a heroic personality if she hadn't been born as a woman. If Fatty were to break his engagement simply because of her appearance, it would be tantamount to missing out on an opportunity. However, that flaw in her physical appearance had foreordained her life to that of tragedy. After all, majority of men judged women by their appearance alone. A woman's inner grace alone wouldn't hold much importance for a vast majority of men. Though it wouldn't be pleasant to hear. But the fact was Jun Moxie only admired her because he was unrelated to this whole matter. If Minister's son were to say to him, "I'll give my daughter's hand to you if you really think so highly of her. Will you take good care of her?" The young Master Jun would have immediately disappeared. He would have escaped the city for a lifetime, never ever looking back at the Sun family's granddaughter again, let alone recognize this gem of a person. Elder brother Moxie. Sister Sun's appearance doesn't stand out, but she is good-natured, kind-hearted and very intelligent. I have been a close friend of hers, and she is a very remarkable person. She is straightforward and does not take trivial matters to heart. I am very fond of her. Dugu Xiao Yi said in a musical voice as she petted and stroked Little White. You're absolutely right. Jun Moxie exclaimed in heartfelt admiration. Jun Moxie could sense that this girl knew how to discern nonsensical falsehoods even though she conducted herself in a naive and pure manner. So much so that she could be deemed quite objective even though she came across as immature. Very few women were capable of differing from the conventions by so straightforward in this era's background. Therefore, although Sun Xiaomei was born with some physical flaws, her personality was nevertheless quite commendable. Sun Xiaomei smiled as she sat down. She lifted the teapot to pour Jun Moxie a cup as she raised her eyebrows and addressed him. Young Master Jun, although we have met for the first time, I find that the rumors about you are not in agreement with reality. Yes? Jun Moxie asked with a mischievous smile as he raised the teacup. What do you find to be in disagreement? Sun Xiaomei didn't reply immediately, but instead smiled in a carefree manner. Her masculine smile somehow fit well with her rough face. To tell you the truth, this young woman is not here to meet Tang Yuan. Sun Xiaomei smiled. The marriage between Tang Yuan and this young woman had been arranged by our respective parents. I have already accepted my misfortunes as a decree of fate since I'm an ugly woman. And I bear no intention to rebel. However, I have a record of all matters concerning Tang Yuan over these past 5 years, what he did, what he said, where he went, everything under the sky. I know it like the back of my hand. The young master Jun suddenly started feeling cold. Jun Moxie observed a moment of silence for Fatty Tang. The hitman could already foresee a very tragic life for that fatty. Not only is Tang Yuan not a good person, he is not even a proper gentleman. Sun Xiaomei smiled as she looked at the fallen Tang Yuan. To put it bluntly, he is a proper scoundrel from head to tail. A really vile character. Well said. Jun Moxie laughed heartily as he clapped his hands. I'd say you've hit the bull's eye. However, this nasty guy is still very genuine by nature. Sun Xiaomei smiled glibly. He never conceals his likes and dislikes. Plus, he's as openly vocal and upfront about the things he hates. I like such genuine people. He has a bad reputation and is considered to be unworthy by everyone since he has a very bad record for the son of a nobleman. He is as fat as a pig. And as dumb as a donkey. You as his close friend must be familiar with all of this, so I needn't comment on all this. I would just like to stress on one point. I have observed his intrinsic traits. And I believe that Tang Yuan is a man still, not a mere farm animal. Therefore, I don't have anything to be dissatisfied about. Moreover, my own situation isn't so great either. Keeping that in mind, being able to find such a life companion is more than I could have asked for. Sun Xiaomei smiled lightly. It's apparent that we are a match made in heaven. Cool. Jun Moxie coughed several times since he was unable to think of a fitting response. He hadn't met such a woman since he had arrived in this world. She was very open about her appearance. And also about her marriage. In fact, she made no attempts to avoid either of the topics. Any other woman in her place would have been too shy, and would have stopped talking a while back. Sun Xiaomei, however, had actually gone on an incessant harangue. This in itself was enough to describe her as a heroic woman. Third young master Jun. You needn't cough. You understand worldly matters, so consider this besides me. Who in this world can tolerate Tang Yuan? Sun Xiaomei smiled. He is so heavy. This time, Jun Moxie was completely shocked. His eyes opened as wide as his mouth as he speechlessly stared at her. This young woman is truly a tigress. Who else would dare to speak like this? Dugu Xiao muffled her laughter with her hand, but her delicate shoulders still jittered incessantly. She was aware of her close friend's temperament. Therefore, she could naturally understand that her companion was being coy. I've been aware of third young master's reputation for a long time. I had guessed that you would aid Tang Yuan by preventing any humiliating circumstances from arising, especially the ones that may involve the Tang and Sun family's name. And for that, this young woman would like to thank you. Sun Xiaomei is blessed to meet you in person today. Sun Xiaomei lowered her head as she poured more tea. She then continued in an unhurried manner. You are wise and far-sighted. Therefore, you may already know that this young woman is here for 2 reasons. First, I had to see for myself just how fat my fiancé is, and the second, which was my priority, to see if the rumors about your distinguished self were really true. Assuming I had understood Fatty Tang correctly, I had guessed that he would pull you along. And he did just that. Why did you wish to see me? Jun Moxie asked in a bewildered tone. What are you up to? Ah. You arranged your blind date with Fatty, just to see me? This is really strange, but I doubt that she'd try to kill me over that wife gambling incident. Apart from thanking you, I had to see something for myself. I have two close friends, and they are so close to me that they are like my younger sisters. Sun Xiao Mei gave a meaningful look to Dugu Xiao Yi as she continued. One of them deplores you. Her hatred for you is so high that it cannot be topped. While the other one has strong feelings for you, and roots for you passionately. When she speaks of you, it feels like her life would become unworthy of living without your existence. I came here out of curiosity. I wanted to see what kind of charm the number one debauchee of this city exudes. For you evoke such strong, yet opposite reactions from my two sisters. Dugu Xiao Yi twisted her waist and leaned to one side as she heard this. Her face, on the other hand, turned red as she protested. Sister Xiao Mei. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 238. The Troublesome Iron-Winged Panther. Jun Moxie laughed out loud and crossed his legs. He swayed for a while and said, "May I know which of your sisters is so deeply attached to me?" Haha. I'm one of the most bitterly detested individuals of the Tianxiang city. In fact, I fear that 8 of 10 people would agree with this statement. But someone being deeply attached to me, this is the first time I've heard something like this. I'm quite interested in knowing people with such discerning eyesight. Dugu Xiao Yi nervously looked at Sun Xiao Mei upon hearing this. Her eyes seemed to be praying for her friend's silence. I talk of a person who used to be far away, beyond the horizon. Sun Xiao Mei smiled mysteriously as she ignored Dugu Xiao Yi's impleading glance. But has appeared right under your nose now. Young Master Jun, you have even exchanged a token of affection with her. And yet you're confused? Exchanged a token of affection? Jun Moxie was aghast with shock. Then, he immediately recalled when Dugu Xiao Yi had given him her jade pendant. Could it be that, oh God? The young Master Jun turned sharply to look at the shy and timid Dugu Xiao Yi. Her small head was facing downwards, and was withdrawn into her collar. It seemed that she wouldn't lift it up again, come what may. Jun Moxie sighed deeply. What doubt would remain after taking all this into account? He hadn't expected that this silly little girl would try to approach a marriage in such a dubious manner. The thought of this depressed him a little. However, he also felt a little proud of himself for reasons unknown. The original Jun Moxie was regarded as scum and a bully by everyone. Therefore, it was only natural that no one would form a favorable impression of him. On the other hand, the hitman had only arrived in this world a very short while ago. However, he had already gotten a beautiful woman to fall for him. In fact, the seeds of affection had been rooted so deeply that she was already trying to set up their marriage. He naturally couldn't help but feel a bit proud of himself. Dugu Xiao Yi started becoming increasingly bashful. So much so that her mind turned a bit hazy. Sister Sun is being so straightforward and loud about this. I could almost die of embarrassment. Sun Xiao Mei was paying attention to every subtle change in Jun Moxie's expression. Finally she spoke. Now I understand. My younger sister who detests and hates you to her bone is reasonable in doing so since her opinion of you is justifiable. As for the opinion of my other younger sister, it seems that her affection for you may not be without reason either. Miss Sun, this discussion has been awfully puzzling. I find myself in a state of complete confusion. Jun Moxie made a dispirited gesture with his hands. I still haven't been able to understand your intention. You don't understand, that's good too. It would be quite unfortunate if you were clearly able to comprehend everything. Sun Xiao Mei smiled faintly. She then unexpectedly looked at him in a pensive manner. Third young master. You're not a good man. Or at least not what they call an upright gentleman. In fact, I'm still quite curious to know how many people you actually deem important. The hitman was terrified. He suddenly raised his head and asked in a serious tone, "What did you say?" Had he underestimated this woman? Arrogance. Disdain for all under heaven. This prominence of this character trait can be clearly gleaned from your eyes. Perhaps your eyes appear serene and calm to most people, so much so that you may be considered cool-headed and peaceful. However, they constantly reveal your arrogance in reality. In fact, your efforts to conceal it are useless in front of someone who understands this. Sun Xiaomei smiled gently. Now I'll tell you this, as a customary gift for our first meeting. Okay? It will bode well to rein in your arrogance and act amicably, no matter how much money you have, or how arrogant you are. After all, now is not the time for you to be so hubristic. She smiled sweetly after saying this. She then stood up and went over to Dugu Xiaoyi and started caressing her beautiful hair as she warmly addressed her. Little sister, your way of looking at things is good, but it's such a pity. But what's a pity? Sister son? Dugu Xiaoyi's face couldn't hold that bashful shade as she anxiously asked. It is such a pity that you're still very young. Sun Xiaomei replied with a smile. Her heart wanted to say more, but she suppressed those words nonetheless. Such a man cannot be tamed by any woman. You will taste a lot of bitterness for this in the future, little sister. This woman is very difficult to deal with. Jun Moxie's heart shivered with cold. She can perceive even the minutest of changes, almost as if she has a sixth sense. Otherwise she would have never been able to recognize the pride I conceal. Surprisingly, this woman is quite talented. Jun Moxie pondered for a while, and then smiled as a devilish thought suddenly came to his mind. If she marries Tang Yuan, wouldn't I also gain a capable helper? Sun Xiaomei finished speaking, and went over to Tang Yuan. Then, she suddenly kicked his plump buttocks. Stop playing dead. Quickly get up and follow me to my house. My father wishes to meet you. Tang Yuan jumped up wailing, and started massaging his posterior as he chided her angrily. Crazy woman. Don't come near me. Who'd want to return home with you? Whatever, just leave me alone. Sun Xiaomei's face was blank as she suddenly reached out and tightly grabbed Tang Yuan's big and fleshy ear. Then, she forcefully dragged him by it and took him outside. Tang Yuan's initial curses later turned to pleas for mercy. His beseeching continued to remain audible inside restaurant until they had gone so far that he couldn't be heard anymore. At present, the only ones remaining in the hall were the hitman Jun Moxie, who was busy contemplating, and Dugu Xiaoyi, who still sitting giddy and red-faced. Dugu Xiaoyi's embarrassment was clearly visible on her face. She's had always considered that woman to be quite clever. It was difficult for her to fathom why her elder sister would betray her like this, since Sun Xiaomei clearly knew about her feelings towards the man. Speaking of it so bluntly in front of Jun Moxie was like leaving me to die of embarrassment. Dugu Xiaoyi had become so self-conscious upon finding herself alone with Jun Moxie that she wanted to stand up and run away. However, she would hate to leave at this point since she'd finally gotten to see him after facing a lot of difficulties. Moreover, it was difficult for her to foresee another chance of meeting him since her family was against this matter. He's just sitting there, frowning like a dumb-witted blockhead. I don't even know what he's thinking, he's not even saying anything. It's a pity this little girl was the last thing on the young Master Jun's mind. Right now, it was continuously reverberating with Sun Xiaomei's final statement. It will bode well to rein in your arrogance and act amicably, no matter how much money you have, or how arrogant you are. After all, now is not the time for you to be so hubristic. This statement had sounded as deafening as the morning bell to Jun Moxie's ears. The young Master Jun had managed to learn some formidable laws after coming to this world, and effectively had a few supernatural techniques at his disposal. Moreover, the memories of his previous life's skills were also intact. However, those memories weren't alone to cross over to this world. The prideful, cruel, and untamed soul of the evil monarch had also followed. There is no reason for me to not be arrogant. Why shouldn't I be proud with so many of such high-level qualifications in my arsenal? Whether it was this world's sky Xian experts, spirit Xian experts, or great masters, none held any importance in the hitman's eyes. In his opinion, this world's inhabitants were second-rate experts, and were nowhere near the ones he had come across in his previous life. As a result, he subconsciously acted arrogantly since he considered everyone beneath him. In addition to this, he didn't give much importance to the concept of life or death. This obviously elevated in his arrogance to a more prominent position. Yet, Sun Xiaomei had unintentionally pointed out his character's greatest flaw in just a few words: pride. Too much pride. If a commoner was allowed to have pride, then the Jun family's youngest heir was more than entitled to act arrogantly inside the Tianxiang city, without anyone raising an eye. However, the Jun family's young dandy bore no qualifications which could justify his temperament in distant lands, especially in these precarious times when he was involved with both the Silver Blizzard City and the Shui Han Manor. The Jun family's young master was nothing for these two powerhouses. In fact, they could dispose him whenever they so desired. It seemed the need of the hour for him to better his attitude and rein in the unnecessary arrogance. As he was thinking this, he heard Dugu Xiao Yi hum. She then shifted in her stool and changed its direction with her buttocks, before letting out another hum, and then continued with shifting the stool. She kept wiggling on her seat while changing its directions around the table. A dark expression was slowly spreading across her small and pretty face. Her small hands were incessantly rubbing little white to no avail, which was left wailing miserably upon being so rubbed. "Is there a bug under your butt?" asked the bewildered Jun Moxie. "Why is this girl constantly twisting her butt like there's a maggot under it?" "There's a bug under your ass," Dugu Xiao Yi shouted back. "You don't pay attention to me, you don't speak to me. You. I hate you," Dugu Xiao Yi retorted angrily. She whimpered and stamped her feet, for she felt more maligned with every passing minute. He had been ignoring her, and had hardly said a word to her. In fact, he had been giving her the cold shoulder ever since he had arrived. Jun Moxie was stunned. Why is this girl so angry? He didn't know how to confront this young Mrs. Temperament. At the end of his wits, Jun Moxie spoke somewhat impatiently. Ugh. Stop shouting or I'll leave." "You." Dugu Xiao Yi felt a burst of anger rising in her. She hurtfully looked at Jun Moxie for a while. Then, she bit her lip, controlled her rage, and said, "First, you caused me so much trouble, and now you want to leave?" "Trouble?" Jun Moxie opened his eyes. "When did I cause trouble for you? Aren't you the one spurring all the trouble? Why are you reversing the facts? Just look at Little White. He has turned my family upside down these last few days." Dugu Xiao Yi bit her upper lip. Such a young level 8 iron-winged panther is practically unheard of, and it suddenly showed up at my house. You think that's not going to be problematic? TSK. Have you noticed the city situation lately? And I've been carrying this around. My dad interrogated me, he almost hit me. This was certainly troublesome, but it couldn't be helped. Regardless, Jun Moxie inquired further. What did he say? After he got anxious, he said, "You are asking me what the problem is? You came back holding that thing in your arms. And you're still asking me what the problem is? I'm completely confused. Why don't I just cut you up and send you to hell? Maybe you can then find his parents and ask them what the problem is." Dugu Xiaoyi imitated Dugu Wudi perfectly, but couldn't refrain from smiling thereafter. Jun Moxie was between laughter and tears. "I'll cut you and send you to hell so you can catch hold of its parents?" It was difficult to say how Dugu Wudi reached this conclusion. However, it was a good thing that the conviction of his argument made up for the lack of reason in his words. He's got some talents. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 239. Dreamy Feelings. Your father is really talented, and his plan is indeed very creative. Jun Moxie burst out in admiration and sighed. Though he inwardly criticized that tiny creature, even if someone was willing to die and go to hell for this, it would still not do any good. Even this iron-winged panther's parents wouldn't be able to explain any of this. After all, this little thing has already overstepped every iron-winged panther in the history. Even the ancestors of the iron-winged panthers, or even the most powerful iron-winged panther in history, wouldn't be able to explain this. He looked at that little girl once again. This little girl is also a first-class talent in her own merit. Moreover, she has a very unique personality. She was annoyed just a moment ago. Annoyed enough to start shouting. In fact, it seemed as if her eyes would start tearing. But her tears quickly turned to laughter as soon as recalled a funny incident. Even that tension on her face disappeared. This transformation was really very adorable. I also believe that my father's idea is very clever. It may seem very ineffective at first, but if one follows his directions closely, then this idea could turn out to be very interesting indeed. Haha. Dugu Xiaoyi seemed complacent. In fact, I spent a lot of energy in fabricating a good lie to cover up for you. But I couldn't come up with anything ample. My father can practically read my mind. It's like my mother always says. The wise often appear stupid to most people. That's their true beauty. The wise often appear stupid to most people. True beauty. Using such words to describe General Dugu Wudi is an insult for these pitiful phrases. So, how do we deal with this? Jun Moxie was somewhat touched. This little girl was so pure that she had laid herself bare for other people's needs. She was the complete converse of Dugu Wudi, who was completely barbaric. He'd act without thinking instead of resolving the problem. It'll pass for the time being. Dugu Xiaoyi nodded her head. It goes without saying that many people will try to spend a lot of money to purchase Little White. But I'll drive them all away. He is mine, and therefore they can all forget about their plans. Besides, he's the only eyewitness of our. The volume of her sound kept reducing gradually. It eventually reached a point where only she could hear herself. Jun Moxie wasn't listening to her anyway. After she was done speaking, Dugu Xiaoyi stopped for a while. She then turned her head and looked at Jun Moxie for a while before she spoke in a soft voice. My family received an invitation from the Jun family yesterday. Oh. Jun Moxie raised his eyebrows. I didn't know that you and my father had agreed on a bet. Dugu Xiaoyi seemed a bit anxious yet angry as she stared with eyes wide open. You've actually dared to make a bet again, my father. I really don't what you're thinking. Do you really think that a single bottle of wine could sell for over 10,000 silver taels? This is absolutely impossible. It simply cannot happen. However, you unexpectedly, My father burst into laughter after receiving your invitation yesterday. He said that this bet would finally bring you under control. Ah, did my dad force you to make this bet? Oh, he wants to bring me under control? I don't understand why you feel this bet is bad idea, when in reality I have carefully chosen this opportunity, and have sent the invitations as per my own wish. Besides, who could ever subjugate this unyielding young master? Jun Moxie stroked his chin, while his eyes shone brightly. General Dugu certainly did not force me to make this bet. This was my own doing. As for bringing me under control through this wager is concerned, it would be quite unpleasant to say who puts whom under check. The young Master Jun hadn't forgotten that the Dugu family would owe him an astronomical debt if his wine auction was successful. However, when it comes to it, will General Dugu lower his head because of the debt? Are you sure? Dugu Xiaoyi asked with a look of concern in her eyes. It was obvious that she didn't want Jun Moxie to lose this bet. Therefore, she would rather that her father lost. But it will be ugly. How can you possibly beat my dad in this unfair game of gambling? It is difficult to say whether it is fair or unfair. Jun Moxie stopped after he solemnly spoke these three phrases. He was confident of his plan. In fact, even if this game was going to be unfair to someone, it would most likely not be so to the young Master Jun. However, if this world's gavel did not fall in his favor by chance, he would still have a 1 in a million contingency in place. How about I accompany my dad tomorrow? Dugu Xiaoyi's eyes suddenly brightened as her expression changed. She lowered her head and bit her teeth as she made up her mind. If he makes things difficult for you, I will start crying, and I will create a scene. I won't allow him to bully you. Please don't worry about it. The saying, a woman's heart is with the one she loves, is definitely not wrong. This little girl's mind was filled with concerns about Jun Moxie's well-being, and she was only contemplating means to prevent him from losing to her father. However, she had forgotten that if her old man lost, then her family would be burdened with a debt, and a very large one at that. Jun Moxie had always been cool-headed, callous and cold-blooded in his approach. However, for the first time in his life he softened up. This little girl was wholeheartedly thinking solely of his welfare. Jun Moxie was no fool. How could he not see it? Men aren't made of stones. They can't be that heartless. Young woman, don't worry. I will not lose. Jun Moxie smiled warmly and extended his hands towards Dugu Xiaoyi to caress her hair. But as soon as his hand came into contact with it, he felt like he was hit by an electric shock and quickly withdrew his hands. He had subconsciously gotten close to this woman in a way which was completely in contravention to his identity as a hitman. He had always carried himself as a hitman in both his lives. This, however, was the first time he had acted as such. Though he wasn't a hitman in this world. Jun Moxie smiled as he stood up and softly spoke. I must leave. Dugu Xiaoyi lowered her head, while her heart started to beat wildly. This was the first time he had spontaneously touched her on his own, even if it was just her hair. She felt as if her entire body was going weak, while her face started to feel feverish. Her mind, on the other hand, was racing. What just happened? What am I doing? Why am I acting like this? Why am I behaving like a nitwit? However, she had a vague feeling that something had been different during this entire tryst. This behavior of his was different from before. Earlier, the young Master Jun was just a slippery-tongued debauchee who always feigned a frivolously flirtatious attitude of a spoilt brat. On the contrary, he seemed preoccupied this time, while every move he made seemed earnest. Oh. Dudu Xiaoyi's lips quivered as she answered softly. She stood up with her head drooping down, while her eyes seemed to be watching her own toes. Her voice was so soft when she spoke up again that young Master Jun couldn't hear anything even though he stood in close proximity. You're leaving already? All right. Though, this young woman really wanted to say, I could finally meet you with such difficulty. However, this sentence got stuck and refused to come out of her mouth. She swallowed it, deliberated on it again and again, and eventually remained silent as she felt too embarrassed to say it out loud. Dugu Xiaoyi's face shone like a transparent white jade in the sunlight. The soft and smooth strands of hair seemed to be dancing in the wind. One strand fluttered along her temples and came to rest on her cheek, right next to her beautiful nose. Her long eyelashes were calmly drooping down, and would only be disturbed momentarily when he would blink. Her bright red and plump lips pursed because she was softly biting her white teeth. Her face was clearly showing her reluctance to part with him. Such was the scene of a young maiden in love who was trying her best to conceal her feelings. Though the more she tried to hide her feelings, the more adorable she looked. This astonishingly beautiful appearance of hers left the young Master Jun staring in awe. He had become accustomed to seeing celebrities in his previous life. In fact, he had seen all sorts of beautiful women. However, this was the first time he had seen a beauty as true and pure as hers. He found it difficult to suppress that feeling of tender love and affection which was arising in his heart, and conceived this thought for the first time in his mind: this girl is so pretty, even when compared to the most beautiful women, she still wouldn't seem inferior in any way. For a moment, there was pin-drop silence in the hall. Their delicate breathing wasn't enough to break this silence. Dugu Xiaoyi's beautiful face turned red, as if feeling his burning gaze on her. She couldn't help but continue to look down bashfully. She started drawing circles on the ground with her toes while stroking little White's silky white fur with her hands. Dugu Xiaoyi felt as if they were floating amidst the clouds, as if they were the only two people left in this huge world. Little White's sneeze broke the silence, and woke the two of them up. Dugu Xiaoyi bashfully raised her blushing face, and glanced at him timidly as she softly said, "Fool, weren't you going to leave? Why haven't you left?" Jun Moxie suddenly realized that he had lost control over his mind, and was being rude. However, this was the first time that his conduct had faltered during his 2 incarnations. He quickly got his act together, and laughed as he said, "I almost don't want to leave after seeing such a beautiful girl. It seems like you have awoken a perverted embodiment of mine." Dugu Xiaoyi lightly glanced at him as she softly spoke, "Shut up. You think I am scared of your perverted manners? Moreover, it seems that you have a matter to rush to. Hurry up and attend to it." She turned away after saying this. Jun Moxie could clearly see that even the nape of Dugu Xiaoyi's neck had turned red. He had spoken these words rather seriously, so how had it embarrassed her? Young Master Jun had enjoyed very little intimacy with women in his previous life, and hence couldn't understand Dugu Xiaoyi's current mindset. On the other hand, she had just realized that the tone of her speech resembled that of a wife speaking to her husband just before he leaves for work. Her tone had been lukewarm, almost as if she was gently cautioning him. She recalled that her mother also used to speak like this right before her father would go out for a battle. She became even shyer upon realizing all this, and couldn't help wondering, are we like that? What's he to me? The more she thought about it, the redder her face became. Soon, it was almost as if her face resembled the brilliantly shining red clouds of dawn. She naturally couldn't gather the courage to lift her pretty little head again. Ha! Ha! Pretty! Very pretty! Jun Moxie exclaimed in admiration. Then he suddenly reached out with his hands and cupped her face. He then felt it for a while, before softly pinching it. He clicked his tongue and exclaimed, "Quite smooth, very fragrant, haha." He laughed loudly. His clothes fluttered in the wind as the sound of his footsteps gradually faded away into the distance. He had acted frivolously in order to cover up for his flustered heart. Hitman Jun had nearly fallen from grace, and had fled for the first time in his life, only to find his heart beating wildly like a drum. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 240. Aristocratic Status. Dugu Xiaoyi's heart was beating wildly. Jun Moxie's hand had just caressed her cheek, and she simply couldn't contain her embarrassment anymore. She instantly recalled something, and said, "Damn it. I'll definitely visit you tomorrow." Her voice was low whereas her head was still drooping down, same as before. Therefore, she obviously didn't know whether he had heard her or not. "Excellent. I'll look forward to your visit." A wisp of young Master Jun's clear and cheerful voice floated towards the beautiful woman's ears, and stayed there, till she looked up. Even his shadow was no longer there in front her. Dugu Xiaoyi stood up hurriedly. She then swiftly took 2 steps at a time as she rushed towards the hall's entrance. Then, she expectantly raised her eyes, only to see that man turning a corner at the end of the street atop his horse. An intoxicated look of longing filled her eyes as she fantasized gazing at the empty street. A dreamy smile surfaced on her face as she blushed, unable to speak her or move. "That scoundrel, how dare he pinch my face? How could he? I will definitely find him tomorrow. And I'll settle this account by fiercely kicking his butt." The merry Dugu Xiaoyi snorted as she tried her best to appear angry. However, her eyes, which she had no control over, were curved like the crescent moon, clearly revealing her bashful, happy, and satisfied frame of mind. Jun Moxie rode home alone. He was unable to figure out why he felt so pleased since his mind had never experienced such joy. Furthermore, he had become aware that he felt a little giddy and happy. He naturally hadn't had anything to drink, yet he was still feeling a bit tipsy. He obviously hadn't heard a funny joke, yet the corners of his mouth were stretched into a tender smile. That nasty girl. Did that little girl poison me? Such emotions are like a poisoned wine which once drunk would have a lifelong effect, with no antidote for cure. This mysterious feeling was giving him a headache. Though he had recuperated his body's health ever since taking it over, he only possessed the body of a youngster around the age of 16. This naturally meant that he hadn't yet reached adulthood from the notions of his previous world. To put it simply, he would still be in the final year of middle school. Perhaps he would be considered slightly more mature than a half-grown young man, at best. Well, that girl seemed to be around the same age, maybe slightly younger. This was unadulterated puppy love. Wow, this is frightening. Puppy love feels wrong. I need to find someone with experience so I can learn more about this condition. Young Master Jun incessantly indulged himself in flights of fancy while pleasantly smiling the entire journey back. To normal people, the hurried hoofbeats of his horse sounded like drums being played upon a victorious general's return. Though to him, these hoofbeats sounded like sweet rhythm, almost as if they were a piece of poetic writing. Jun Moxie dismounted from his horse as lightly as a feather. He was beaming radiantly as he stepped foot on the doorstep of his house. Suddenly, a loud sound interrupted his noxious thoughts. Noxious in the sense that he was already nearing his wedding night. Anyone would despise this person. In fact, a vast majority would recommend handing him a beating with 1,000 lashes until his shameless skin had been peeled away. And then crush his body if nothing else worked. Surprisingly, on one side he thought that puppy love was wrong, while on the other, he was dreaming about his wedding chambers. You, boy, you have returned at last. This old man has comprehended something new today. Come quickly, and take a look. The solitary falcon's voice was galloping with excitement. In fact, it almost seemed as if was trying to flaunt his treasure to someone. He had been busy with his research for several days, and had finally mastered his study. Naturally, he was quite excited about it. The young Master Jun's heart had left him visualizing the countenance of a flower. However, suddenly a man with long and fluttering black hair had appeared in front of his eyes. Moreover, this man's face was as grim and icy as a fiend's. This contrast was really too big. Extremely big. Young Master Jun frowned. He was quite annoyed to see this person since it had destroyed his daydream. As a result, Jun Moxie was suddenly overcome with a wild impulse to kick the solitary falcon. Although he very much wanted to follow through with that urge, he restrained himself since he could not afford to provoke this person for the time being. I don't have time for this. Leave. You are disturbing me with all that noise. Young Master Jun scowled, and his face became dark. He entered his room, and closed the door behind him with a loud bang. The great master, who was following him closely, almost had his nose wedged between the slits of the doors. What's the matter? I had certainly seen this kid smiling a moment ago. He had returned looking happy and giddy, so why on earth was he talking to me like this, like a grandma who is sore on seeing that scoundrel of a son she hates? Solitary Falcon scratched his scalp in confusion. He was at a complete loss. The day had begun like any other ordinary one. However, those invitation letters had soon made it quite unusual. The entire Tianxiang city had flared up. Thoroughly flared up. Each and every man, whose family had even a little bit of influence, was completely engrossed in discussing it. What is this aristocratic hall? Isn't this surprisingly arrogant? The scalding silver invitation cards were mounted by a golden plum blossom. The golden paint was used so precisely while drawing this flower, that each and every petal seemed vivid. In fact, even the stamens were clearly visible. The invitation card's envelope could be considered a valuable piece of art on its own. What's there inside it? On opening the fly leaf, what would shine on one's eyes was nothing other than 2 rows of huge characters inlaid in gold. The first line read, "Frustrated, poor and the sick of heart are kindly requested to leave this route." While the line below read, "Those whose family's worth is below 1 million are not to enter these doors." On opening another leaf of the letter, one would actually find a myriad of characters embedded in gold. Things worth discussing aren't free of charge. The basic need of this world's greatest nobleman was best in quality. How could they be mediocre? They wore fine silk, read golden scripts, heard immortal music, for they had a refined taste, fine tea, and 1 in million wine shall not be wasted on people with none. On the last leaf, there were a handful of large-sized characters written in flamboyant calligraphy. So far, life has been mundane. Why? People were quick to realize that their worth needed to be above 1 million in case they wished to enter this place. This place was a typical, favor the rich and disdain the poor, sort of establishment. Even its name, Aristocratic Hall, was reeking of discrimination. However, This invitation card immediately caused a commotion, even amongst the most inelegant of families. All because of the 3 family stamps it carried. The personal stamp of the Jun family's 3rd master, Jun Xie. The stamp of the Tang family. And perhaps the most unexpected and surprising one, the personal stamp of the Tianxiang Empire's sole prince equivalent. Together, these 3 seals had enough power to give anyone a breathing problem. To decline their invitation would be equivalent to making an enemy out of one's own life expectancy. Even the Mu Rong and the Dugu family could not afford to offend such a monstrous alliance. Momentarily, the members of all noble families in Tianxiang City were found fluttering about to discuss this matter. Just one day of this matter had already blown in a storm of public opinions. In the beginning, all influential families carried this rather profound belief that the actions of the aristocratic hall were no more than a nuisance. Many felt that it was blatantly pandering the rich and disregarding the poor, which was unacceptable to some. However, soon afterwards, the entirety of public opinions down to every individual reversed. Many who received this invitation sighed in relief. They had a joyous expression on their faces even though they didn't agree with it. Meanwhile, many others were left disgruntled. Why haven't I received an invitation even though my family's worth is greater than 1 million? This invitation clearly aims to convene the rich and noble families of Tianxiang City. Then why isn't there one with my name on it? Don't tell me. Is my status lower than other people? As a matter of fact, do they look down upon me? What could be the reason? Such people couldn't reconcile themselves to private discussions, and started to criticize openly since they harbored sentiments of indignation and humiliation. On the other hand, the people who were initially nervous or afraid upon receiving this letter, eventually started to take pride in it. Take a look. Grandpa is an aristocrat. I am a great gentleman. Do you understand? TSK, the prince equivalent. The Jun and the Tang family are 3 of the most influential forces in the Tianxiang city. They have made their judgment in inviting me. Do you still doubt it? You think you're richer than me? You think you have the money? Did you get the invitation? Status. The proof of status was quite simple. Someone either had the invitation or didn't. If someone didn't receive the invitation, then it only meant one of 2 things: either their family wasn't worth over 1 million, or they were mere commoners. This invitation card had become the symbol of aristocracy in a very short period of time. People would wear pure white gowns and stick the invitation card in the collar. They would walk about without caring about how they looked, their chests puffed, and their head held high. This was the new trend of the town, a true sign of elegance and class. Moreover, it was proof of one's aristocratic status. And those who did not get the invitation racked their brains in order to prevent themselves from being outdone. In fact, they hollowed out their minds with 100 plans. Such people would stare wide-eyed at people who they didn't consider as equals. However, they would look away when any such person waved an invitation card in their face. Else they would risk their desire and rage to give them away. Then there were several people who never stepped foot outside their houses. However, they wantonly started visiting their friends and family after receiving the invitation. In fact, the most unreasonable ones were found knocking on over 10 doors in just a day's time. These people were like dogs whose tongues would never tire of wagging. However, none of them could be considered excessive because there were some who were even more unreasonable. So much so that they could leave the rest of them far behind. This single invitation had caused a lot of disturbances throughout Tianxiang City. So much so that even its creator, the young master of the Jun family, hadn't anticipated such a result. Things had escalated to such an extent that some people had even gathered the courage to seek out Jun Xie. In fact, some people had actually offered him huge sums of money in exchange for a single invitation. Jun Moxie didn't know whether to laugh or cry after looking at this matter. To make things worse, some people had even begged him for his favor. This had really gotten out of hand. One can't help but argue that the world has always had its strict hierarchies. However, no one had ever brought this out in a manner as brazen and blatant as the aristocratic hall. Man has but one life. Who wouldn't want a good name for themselves? Right now, people had been presented with an opportunity to seem above the others. They naturally scrabbled madly on this wild goose chase. Just like in modern society, wherein two married women who each had the same gold ring would still intentionally or otherwise compare whose ring was bigger. Therefore, who could blame the city's noble circle for this commotion? Moreover, the aristocratic hall had opened right opposite the magnificent jewel hall. This had immediately attracted interests from the upper class of the city. This business, which hadn't yet auctioned a single item, had aroused anxiety and curiosity in the hearts of many already. This was certainly the first incident of its kind for the Tianxiang city. The first ray of dawn shone from the east, early in the morning, and the doors of the aristocratic hall quietly opened. In its wake, two squads of security guards filed out and neatly organized themselves into two rows to greet the crowd. Everyone who entered was surprised by the lush green courtyard. Moreover, the flowers therein were so strongly fragrant that they could leave anyone intoxicated. No one could prevent their heart from feeling relaxed and unperturbed after entering this courtyard. In fact, even the fussiest person couldn't prevent themselves from being entranced. The flowers inside this courtyard were strongly fragrant even though it was late autumn. In fact, these beautiful flowers seemed to be flourishing, almost as if it was spring. The variety of flowers inside this huge courtyard could leave a very refined and tasteful impression on anyone. The trail seemed to be bending in the shadow of the trees lined up on both sides. The scent of the trees only added to that winding taste of transcendence in the air. The path kept bending again and again, while its width reduced. In fact, one really couldn't tell the length of this trail. It seemed as if it would never come to an end. This point alone differentiated this establishment, and had placed it above all others. Truly deserves to be called the aristocratic hall. Ah! What else could anyone say? Where else can you find so many flowers in late autumn? And that too in the full bloom of spring. Moreover, none of them feel artificial upon touch. What kind of manpower and money does something like this require? This story will be continued to chapter 241. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.